I don't usually jump right into questions, but I think today I might. And when I read the book, a lot of things jumped out at me. But what's it like to be shot?
It well, disassociative for starters. And I think if you were in a combat zone, maybe you would be ready for it. I was on Guadalupe Street in Austin, Texas, and in a previous life, I was an independent filmmaker, and I was there at South by Southwest with my buddy Dante, who was the director of the film that I had written, and we were trying to get to another screening, and I was walking down Guadalupe Street, and I saw a guy point at me. I remember he was driving this big uh, Chevy Blazer, the old ones that were kind of a Bronco knockoff, and had glass pack pipes. And I remember I was like, God, the loud ass pipes on that Blazer sounds good. And I looked into the cab and I saw the guy point at me. I didn't realize it was nighttime, so I didn't know he was pointing a gun at me. And then he shot, and I thought, that sounds like a 22. And because I used to be a riflery instructor with the Boy Scouts, and I was like, and I spent a lot of time shooting 22, and I was just like, it sounds just like a 22. And then I said, and then there was a little limestone wall that ran between me on the other side of me, and then I said, that sounds like a ricochet. And then it's like, it must have been a copper jacketed round. Look at it, it's sparking as it skips along back across the pavement. And as that's happening, I'm like turning down. I'm going down on one knee because something spun me, and I'm had a reaction to it, and I got shot in the hip, and it like cut my jeans, right above my hip pocket, and I put my hand down on my pocket, and put my hand out, and I was bleeding, and Dante goes, I think that guy threw a firecracker at us, and I was like, no, I think that dude just shot me. And then I was like completely dissociated. It's like, we're going to be late for the movie. And so we just got up and went to the movie, and I'm talking to people in line, and the Austin PD, the movie had started, and over the intercom, the Austin Police Department would like to talk to Steve Grant. And I was like, oh shit. So I had to go out into the lobby and talk to them. The next day I had like a pancake sized bruise on my hip, and you could see where the flesh had kind of gotten furrowed out, like you were using a crescent chisel on a piece of wood.
Very writerly.
Thank you. There you go. I wanted to put those salient details in there, make it vivid. But shot 5 other people, and one of the guys he shot was the lead singer for a band called the Austin Lounge Lizards. And in a truly bizarre synchronicity, the producer for my audio book had been in the Austin Lounge Lizards. And when I read the section of the book about me getting shot, and he asked for some more details, just like you, he's asked for some more details about it. And I told him about it. He's like, oh, goddamn, that was when Reggie or whoever got shot. So you were part of that. I was like, yeah, weird. But it was, it was years before Dad got shot. And at the time I was young and dumb, and I was just like, cool, I got shot, and I walked away from it. And like everywhere else I went in Austin that weekend, people were so Austin's a really chill town. It's really cool. It's not like the rest of Texas. Like, no one gets shot here. And like, I drank for free the rest of the time that I was in Austin. But these things have a cumulative effect. And then Dad got shot, and that has never left me. I'm like, okay, when there are guns around, there is a chance you're going to get shot. Just, it's a non-zero chance that somebody's going to take a crack at you. And you're not supposed to read your reviews on Amazon, but I did. And there was this one guy like, this guy Steve is so anti-gun, and I'm like, I'm not. Like, I'm a gun owner. I believe in responsible gun ownership. Now I've made everybody angry. But he was just like, this typical elitist. He's so anti-gun. It was just like, well, bro, I got shot for starters. Somebody shot my dad, okay, and a bunch of other people. And I don't know, it's altered my perspective a little bit on the subject, but the physical sensation of it was like, the thing I would say was like, it was dissociative. You only put it together after the fact, kind of looking at the highlight reel, it's like, oh yeah, that guy shot me with a 22, and that's what spun me around. And I remember I told my old man, like, and he got, and he is, you know, Dad, not, it probably comes across in the book, it's not a big emoter, and he just looked at me and he goes, I tell you what, that was just a couple of inches inboard that had clipped your femoral, and that would have been it. You'd have had your ticket punched. And I was like, fuck, he's right. You know, it's like, or if he gone with something with a little more power behind it, that would have been it. Hip's a bad place to get shot. And I was just like, Dad went to medical school and loved to opine on various bodily trauma. There you go. That's a fulsome answer.
That's pretty good. The other thing I think people will want to know is what happened to the film. Did it get bought?
Ultimately, the film was purchased by the Independent Film Channel, and kind of in the whole wash of it, we broke even, right? Like, I made no money, accrued no fame. It was a complete non-starter for me from a professional perspective. It's all for the best. I think ultimately I don't like writing for the screen, because you're always kind of dealing with an interstitial medium. Like, if a book, somebody like this book, people read my book, right? And I know that's a little egotistical, but it's like, I still had to go through an editor and a copywriter and all these other stuff. But, you know, when it was on cable in LA, there was a window of about 3 months when it was on. And I remember going to a sandwich shop with the folks I worked with at the ad agency I worked at. And this gal behind the counter at the sandwich place we would go with my team, and this girl goes, "Oh my God, you're the sniper who so respected his grandfather's ways. You were so good in that movie." And all these guys that I work with, I've been very careful to not let anybody know I'm a failed filmmaker. And they're like, "What's she talking about, dude?" And I was just like, "Oh, nothing. Just let's go back to the office." And but I got recognized 2 or 3 times in that period, and then the film came off cable, and that was that. But I've had people write me over the years saying, "Hey, you made my favorite movie," and that was always cool. But yeah,
You've always had this creative and storytelling red thread throughout your entire career, and expressed in different ways. After the filmmaking, screenwriting, and it sounds like acting experience, while you were in LA, did you get drawn back into this underworld of filmmaking at all, or did you just hang it up, man?
No, well, I'll tell you, this is my last filmmaking story. I wrote another screenplay about Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing. I was fascinated, as one does, and I was really interested in him as a guy that kind of came from a rural background like I did, and somehow made himself into the Oklahoma City bomber. And there was being in the Gulf War and his childhood and all the rest of that stuff. It's like, how does somebody wind up taking that trajectory in their life? So wrote a screenplay that ended up going with Dante to the director's lab at Sundance. HBO was going to pick it up, and then
is this Dante who would go to parties with his dog?
100%.
Okay.
His dog Waco, who was named after Waco, Texas. I'm closing all the circles here.
Okay.
And Dante's still a working screenwriter. Like, he wrote the screenplay for the film that became Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise in it, and he did one of the Aliens films. So he's had quite a bit of success. But we got the sweetheart deal. Everybody's like, "Oh, when you come out of Sundance, if HBO will take you and they'll make your film, like, you got to go with them." And we did. And then they got cold feet. And it was absolutely about the material. It was a different time in America, and people were like, "I don't know if Americans want to watch a movie about Americans committing acts of terror." And so they just kind of pulled the tent stakes on it, and then I was like, "That's it, I'm not gonna be a screenwriter. I don't want to do that anymore. It's the effort to impact is not there. And went to Iowa. Did not write a novel. Was kind of dissipated myself for 2 years. And
what was the thinking there? Why did you decide to get an MFA? What were you hoping to get out of it? And what did you see yourself doing on the other end?
Yeah, I was hoping to be a novelist, and I thought, and I've always seen myself as a storyteller and a writer. And my experience at Iowa was fantastic. More than anything else, you spend time with other writers, people that have taken the normal trajectory of the kind of nominal trajectory of writing in American life. What's the life of a writer like? What does it take to be a writer? And you start to think of yourself as a writer, which is more difficult than you might think. I had a lot of imposter syndrome about it. I felt like in fact, right now, 2 weeks, I felt like I could tell say to people, I'm a writer. Like, I got paid to write a book. It came out. You can buy it at Barnes and Noble. But I was hoping to, like, okay, I'll write a novel. I'll get out of that. What happened was, Alicia and I had our first child, and it just came to the thing where we had to pay off the money we had spent on Dreamland, which was the Tim McVeigh project, and I had to go back to work. And then that's where I was for 20 years. Was working and making a living for my family. I saw what people were making, like getting these, assistant professorships in different creative writing programs. It's just like, $50,000 a year is not going to cut it. I wish I could give you a more soul searching answer than it was just the economics of it, but that was a lot of it. And so in some ways, fate tricked me into writing this book, and that's what ultimately kind of held me to the fire and made me do it. But I don't know if I ever would have written again, honestly. I don't want to crush anybody's dreams here, but I think my dreams were crushed, frankly, by the realities of adult life. It's hard making a living as a writer. And, you can write a book and it just kind of disappears below the surface. And it's tough to have the gumption to do that over and over again. I'm not proud of it. I wish I had been somebody that had more grit and sort of ground it out. Because I do think the way I've stuck with writing this book, and despite of all the circumstances that were going on, is the only reason that it came to light, and so but it is incredibly difficult work being a writer, the act of writing itself, and then the entire commercial apparatus around it is a real labyrinth. It's difficult to navigate.
Let's talk about that. I don't think most people are cognizant of most of the aspects of being a professional writer that you just started to share about. And in the book, which everyone should read, it's an amazing book. It's getting some of the best reviews I've ever read from some of the best publications, the New Yorker, the Washington Post. When I got it in the mail, I saw the blurbs on the back: AJ Jacobs, Jonathan Safran Foer, David Von Drale. And it's like, man, how do you even get blurbed by these people? These are like the best blurbs in the world.
You have a great agent and a great publisher.
Yeah.
And if I'd learned anything in the intervening 20 years, it's like, God favors the big guns. And so, I had written a detective novel. So I'm going to undo everything I just told you, which is like, I hadn't totally given up. I'd said, like, I'm going to, all right, what sells? And I was looking at like Michael Connolly and the Bosch books, and like, this guy's cranking out a book, the Jack Reacher books. And like, okay, these guys are writing a book every year. They've got to be making if you could establish as like a franchise, you could make a good living doing that. So I read all of them. I did a spreadsheet. I sort of tried to crack the formula of how do these books work. They're procedurals. It's like, people don't want to watch Law and Order for stunning formal experiments, right? They want to be smoothed. they want to be soothed by like, okay, and then now we're gonna hear the gong, and then we're gonna see a body, and then we're gonna start to unravel the case behind this murder, and then we're gonna go into the courtroom, and it's the whole haiku of it, the formal, it's like people want to go through this, and these detective books are the same stuff. So I come up with one that was going to be set in Charleston, West Virginia, where my dad grew up, and I thought, well, nobody's ever done a procedural set in Appalachia. I'll do that, and
Groundbreaking.
wrote that book, and my friend Andrew Essex, who I've worked with for many years, he was the CEO at Droga 5 when I worked at that agency, and Andrew and I had always connected on writing, and before Andrew was ad CEO, he had worked as a writer at Esquire and Details magazine. And the guy he worked with when he was at Esquire was a gentleman named David Granger, who was editor-in-chief at Esquire for sort of its glory days, about 19 years. And when they kicked Granger out for reasons that are baffling, because the guy was he's a phenomenal editor, he became a literary agent. So Andrew said to me, hey, do you want to see if my friend Granger will read your detective novel? Maybe he could be your agent or help you find an agent. Sure, great. Granger reads it, and he goes, I really like the book. I don't do fiction. Do you have any non-fiction? And all I had were like 2 things that I'd written about delivering the mail. So I had gone through the pandemic, and I said, well, I got this shit I wrote when I was a letter carrier during the pandemic. He said, wait a second, what? And I was like, I lost my job. I was a letter carrier. And I think his commercial instincts pricked up. He's like, that's a good elevator pitch. I think we could sell a book off of that. He goes like, let's take it. Let's sell it. So Mailman was written on proposal. And what that means is you write you basically write a précis and a brief for the book. You include some writing samples. Mine was about 30 pages long. Ultimately, it had an early version of Fuck City in it. It had what they call the plan of the book. I sort of outlined what the book's going to look like. And the book then went to auction. 4 different publishers bid on it, and ultimately Simon & Schuster was the outfit that we went with. So the answer is that how do you get those great blurbs in the back of your book? They are wholly undeserved. But Jonathan Safran Foer is a good friend of Andrew's, and then AJ Jacobs, I think it's Granger's client, and David Draley had worked with my editor Megan Hogan, and so they were like, and I'd actually reached out to a couple of friends of mine from Iowa who maybe also got too famous, and I just never managed to get a log roll from them. So these guys very generously put those blurbs on the back of the book, and so I've been stupidly blessed by good luck in getting this book published, and the type of support that I've had from Simon & Schuster in particular. It's been a fantastic experience, and I wish it could be a more instructive model to other aspiring writers, but it's like I just kind of dumb lucked my way into it. I don't know if that's counter to the hard work and determination narrative that people were hoping to hear, but it was a lot of work writing the book, but I a lot of stars aligned in order for me to be able to bring it to
market. Yeah. And you'd put in several decades of storytelling in different forms. You'd met a lot of people through different aspects of your professional life.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, it's luck, and you put yourself in the position to have that luck, and had met people along the way, and that's what happened.
That's right. Yeah, and it was, and it's you could look at it one way. It was just dumb luck, but it was in fact many decades of work, and it wasn't like I'd never written a word before I wrote it. In fact, when I was trying to figure out, I've never written a memoir before, but when I was trying to figure out what does a 50-year-old Steve sound like? What is my voice as the writer of this book? And I went back and I read a bunch of stuff I had written in my early 30s. And then I started to get it. I was like, okay, wait a second. And that stuff was autobiographical. And I was like, okay, I can do this as a grown man, as a father, as a somebody that's worked for 25 years in white collar America. And that's ultimately how I found it. So chance does favor the prepared. Yes, absolutely.
The premise of the book, it's the pandemic, you lose your job, you have cancer, you need health insurance, and apparently you were not aware that Medicaid exists. I got to the end of the book. The first thing I thought when I read the opening of the book was, does Steve know that Medicaid exists?
Yeah, but apparently I don't. And
God, we wouldn't have this book if you did.
My editor, when she got to that part of the draft, the first time she wrote me, and she was just like, Jesus Christ, how did you not know this? And I was just like, I've been very careful to try to state when I knew I'm privileged, right? It's like I already had a house and a mortgage and all this stuff before it started. I'd saved for a rainy day, knowing that something, not a global pandemic, but I knew that I might get laid off and that I might have to coast for a while before I could get another job. And that's another form of economic privilege. But I had kind of a blind spot. My background is so middle class. I always had healthcare from my dad, and then I had it at school. And then when I got out and I got a job, I had healthcare through my job. And so I just thought, like, no job, no healthcare. It did not occur to me that there was a social, and you would think, like, I lived in the UK for 2 years. I was part of I received care from the NHS while I was there. You'd think I would have or just Googled, like, hey, how do I get healthcare? Like, I didn't even do that. I was just like, I got to get a job because that's how I'm going to get healthcare. So I had a real blind spot about it. I absolutely qualified from day one. I would have been able to do that. And then I don't know what I would have done. Whittle, tie flies.
Different book.
Different book. A less salable book, yeah. Certainly. Yeah.
Yeah. When did you have the idea to create the book, and when in the process of this trajectory did the creation of what became the book start?
Sure. So, as the book starts, the opening, there's a couple of chapters about going to the Postal Academy. And so for those of you that don't know, you don't just rock up. It's not like getting a job at Subway. You are
few things are,
thankfully. They got to background check you. They got to do your fingerprints. You are in what they call a federal position of trust. You're handling people's personal documents. It's protected by the Fourth Amendment. So they got to know, you're a person of good character and going to be trustworthy. And then after that, you got to go through all the training, and you do driver's training, safety training, and then how to handle different classes of mail and all that stuff. And I would come home from Roanoke, where the Postal Academy was, and I would be telling Alicia, my wife, like, God, these guys said this stuff, and it was nuts. And the woman that's sitting next to me has a 38 revolver in her purse and 3 rolls of toilet paper, and I was taking notes on all this because I take notes on everything. And Alicia was like, take notes on everything. Like, she's like, keep track of all this. Like, there's something going on here. And so I did. And early on, I wrote a couple of pieces just about that part of the experience. And my buddy Adam, who lives in London, is British. He's like, hey, are you working on anything these days creatively? And I said, like, I got this. And I sent it to him. He's like, you have to write this book. You have to write this book. And so between Alicia and Adam, they had sort of planted the seed. I was really careful to not do that writer thing of just like, I'm having an experience and I'm going to turn on my internal tape recorder and I'm going to begin shaping how I'm going to say this. Is like, just deliver the mail, dude. Just go out there and do your job. But I would take notes as it went through. And then when I began talking with Granger, my agent, he was like, how do you think you want to take, how do you think you would take this on as a book? And well, all right, we're not going to play games with time. It's just going to be, it's going to start at the beginning and it's going to go through the year, and it has a natural arc to it. And so I not to get too much into process, but like I just arbitrarily cut it into 10 pieces. And I said, let's fill in things that we knew happened over that timeline. And as I started working my way through that, I realized that there were more thematically organized ideas that I could get into in individual parts of the book. And and that's when I started to realize it's like, okay, if I was reading this book, I would want something from the writer about like, yeah, but what were you feeling? Like, what was it like? You know, how did it change you? Granger always said that when he was an editor at Esquire, he said like, I always, he goes, I always try to assign a piece to a writer that it would change the writer. He said it actually killed a couple of them. But he goes, but I wanted to change people. So the film Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, about the writer at Esquire who um, uh, interviews Fred Rogers, and it goes through this very transformative healing experience. It was like, it wasn't Christine. It's the editor in chief is played by Christine Lottie in the movie, but it's actually David Granger was the actual person that assigned that writer to have that interview, because he had an instinct that it was going to change that guy. And the first draft of the book, I was so focused on the mechanics of, then I drove here and then I carried this route and then I did that. My buddy Dante read that draft and he goes, so there's two problems with this draft. The first one is a lot of it reads like you're writing for LinkedIn. It's sort of like a career. It's sort of, it's just sort of like very bland corporate writing. And the second one is when it doesn't sound like that, you sound like an asshole. I was like, okay, let's what what was I feeling? How? And I'm going to just have to have the guts to actually tell people that, which for of everything in the book, that was the hardest thing to do. Is like, all right, I'm going to have to tell people I was scared. I'm going to have to tell people I was angry. I'm going to have to tell people I was a dick to my family. I'm going to have to tell people that I like had a nervous breakdown and completely decompensated at one point. Like and I grappled with depression, and but then a lot of other really great stuff happened too. And that was hard, but it once I had to work through all the kind of the chronological stuff to figure out how to actually find the story in there, because I had a lot of great stories that I had been telling people for a couple of years at that point, of just like, oh, and then these guys with guns showed up at the house, and then the mailbox was full of wasps, um, but organizing that into like the actual living experience of going through that year, that was something that I felt my way through multiple drafts. It didn't immediately reveal itself to me. Is that a writerly enough answer?
They're all fantastic. As you worked your way through that process, and again, at this point, when you're actually composing the book, you have a world-class agent, you have a deal, and you also have to do the work, and you have to get to the product that's going to be sufficient to actually go to market, sell it, get it out there. Did you always have total confidence that you were going to get it to the place it needed to be?
Absolutely not. I would say,
it kind of sounds like it right now. So can you tell me what actually like?
You're hearing some significant retcon here.
Yeah.
Regarding, that's the magic of memory, and I talk about it in the author's note at the beginning of the book. Like, all writers are deeply untrustworthy eyewitnesses, right? It's like you begin rewriting your memory of something, the ink isn't even dry, on the internal printing press in your head. After you just had the experience, your brain is already rewriting it. And so as I sit here and tell you this story of like, and this is how I wrote the book, as though it was like I had a punch list and I just went down it and cranked it right out. Um, Look, the bigger frame around writing the book was I had a full-time job as a senior strategist in a large multinational company, and then my father died, and there were all kinds of real world fallout from that, not just emotional but financial, and then taking care of mom who has dementia, and you know I and I'm on contract, man. The freaking book is due. I've taken part of the advance, and I begin completely melting down, and I'm not, like, just from a bandwidth perspective, how am I going to write this book? Like the putting in enough reps to get the book done. How am I going to do it? And I didn't come up with the answer. Alicia and Dante came up with the answer, which was, okay, once Steve kind of gets things to where they are going to be stable enough back in Blacksburg, Steve can go live in my cabin up near Lake Arrowhead in California. I'll work my day job East Coast hours, so I get that the 3 hours of West Coast time. I'll work my day job, get up early at dawn, basically, put my 8 hours in, hike off the mountain, get something to eat, come back up, and then work in the evening. And as my goal for the first draft was just, can I just have words from the beginning to the end? And parts of that draft were really good and survived largely intact to the present day. Huge swaths of it were just garbage. But it was the literal organization of my time. How am I going to get enough time to write this book? And then get up on a Saturday morning, and I didn't have, Alicia was taking care of the kids. I was just writing, and I would try to get 25, 30 hours of writing in Saturday and Sunday, and would stock food on Friday so that I didn't have to leave the cabin, and just like grind it, beast mode, just grind on it. And the developing the process to do that was nothing I could have imagined before I started. And the mental discipline to just like, this is it. You have upended your life in order to be able to write this book. Everybody's expecting you to do it. You wanted to do this, like you want to do this. And that's what kept me going. But there were multiple points at which I was just like, everything you're writing is hot garbage. This has been a phenomenal mistake that you've made. I'm a good salesman. I always have been. And my professional career has been about selling the services of an agency or a large company. And I sold the book, right? But now you got to write the son of a bitch. And that is when the doubt really hit me. This is like, you're the dog that caught the car, man. Now you got to do this thing. And that is a downside of writing a book on proposal that I wouldn't have anticipated, right? It's just like, okay, but you're on the hook now. But you want to talk about the Tim Ferriss forcing function. It was like, you're committed at this point. Like, you're going to the moon, so you better be ready when you land, because you're going. You're either gonna have to give the money back and humiliate yourself, or finish it. But it racked with doubt at multiple points. And like when I first got feedback on the first draft, devastated. Second draft, also devastated. I was just like, okay, this isn't like this. You've gone through these two Herculean efforts, and you're like, this is not there yet still, and I'm like, occasionally prostrate yourself in front of your editor and go like, but are we making headway here? Are we getting closer? And that was very new for me. Working with an editor was very new for me. And actually, Megan was a just very gentle, very patient guide. And that helped a lot. You think about it, ultimately writing is like you're alone in a room with yourself for hours and hours and hours. But everything beyond that was a team sport. And I don't think that gets talked about enough.
When you were getting feedback from your editor and your agent on those drafts, I have not been in the professional writing, that type of writing or journalism game for quite a while. When I was, it was pre video conferencing. There was no Zoom. There's none of this. And I would send someone a Word document in New York. Then it's some indeterminate period of time later, usually the worst possible time, I would think, okay, I'm not getting feedback. I'm getting the check. Like, this is just going forward. And then I'd get the email back, and then it would have some block of text at the bottom. Like, I couldn't even redline a document at that point in time.
Yeah.
And, these were shorter pieces. And I mean,
Yeah.
in the case of my novel, it was a little bit different. But for me, most of it was journalism, feature writing. And then someone would just shit all over whatever I had made. Then I'd kind of have to read their mind. They often wouldn't get on the phone. What's it like today with technology, and how far down the road would you get in a draft before showing it to your editor or agent to get some course correction or feedback?
So it's not, the feedback can happen over video or over a phone call, and that's still, and that was a change. I committed a real error early on of submitting an outline, and I was like, here's my outline. Before I hand you the first draft, let's go over my outline together. And I could tell the level of buyer's remorse that the publisher had as they went through this, document of mental illness that I had put together. Because it was an outline. It was kind of in classic outline format, but then it also included like blocks of prose and then like my own notes to myself. And I just like, I can't believe as a grown man, I was like, they'll get it. They'll read between the lines. It's like, if I'd been had put my professional hat on, I've said, like, you would never show a client this. Don't ever show them this. This is not ready for front of house. Like, don't send this out. And they blanched. They were terrified. But then after that, so then I told Megan, I said, look, let me finish a draft. Let me go from one end to the other. And that's all done in Word. So I didn't work in Word. I worked in a program called Scrivener, which is way better to work in than Word. But then ultimately I had to like generate a Word document in classic manuscript format, send that then. And then Megan track changes, like redlined the whole thing. She sent me a very nice editorial letter at the start of that. And then I talked to her about her changes. And then I went away for another, few months and did it again. And then we did it again. And that hang time between sending in and then you're waiting to hear back. And then for me, it's like I'm getting 300 pages of redlined manuscript and then this editorial letter on top of it. And Megan's note to me on the first draft was also like, you sound like an asshole. She was nicer about it, but I was just like, okay, what am I doing? I don't think I'm an asshole. I mean, I am at times an asshole, but like, that's not like my primary mode, I would like to think. And so what am I doing wrong? And I thought I was tough coming into this. It's like, man, I went to Iowa. People cried, people cried in workshop. I worked in ad agencies. People cry, people break stuff. It's like, I'm seasoned. I'm going to be, but it's like, it's your stuff. You're writing about your life. It'd be one thing even if it was just my writing, but it felt like I was being weighed in a balance. It's like, this is how you behaved during the pandemic. These are the choices you made. This is how you're choosing to present yourself in your writing. And it was tough. It was tough to take. It was hard to listen to, but you know, I got more confident as I went. I began to become more convinced of like, okay, maybe I am figuring out how to do this. And you know, there was an interview in the time, an actual review in the New York Times that just came out, and my writing was referred to as unpolished. And I had a real visceral, difficult reaction to that. I was like, unpolished, man. I went through like 5 drafts on this. And then ultimately you have to go like, okay, but I was happy with it. Like I wrote the book I wanted to write, and you hear people say that, and I did write the book I wanted to write, but still, it's just like it hurts. I've read reviews on Amazon that like, here I am, a 55-year-old grown man, and I'm just like, oh come on, man, that's kind of a mean thing to say. You know, it takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of guts to write a book. I kind of already knew like how much work people did. Maybe I did, but anybody that could sit down and do that and then expose themselves feels very naked doing that.
When you read that line in the New York Times review calling your writing unpolished, did part of you also think, fuck, the New York Times is writing about my book?
so this is when years of therapy kick in, and you go, okay, let's challenge that thought, and like, okay, holy shit, I'm in the New York Times, and yeah, it is a feature of it is the negative bias of human psychology, right? It's like, I'm in the goddamn New York Times. Okay, there was a photo feed. It wasn't me, but there was like a picture of a mail truck and a field of wildflowers. I got it. Dwight Garner reviewed it. You know, my editor, the publisher, my agent, everybody's like, man, this is a fucking great review. This is a great review. And I'm like, and it is. It's like, one, I'm in there at all, right? So let's just be grateful for that. 2, it really is a good review, and the book comes off really well in it. I'm still having occasional intrusive thought about that, but you know, I've been very blessed with great reviews on this book.
Your relationship with your wife, I mean, you've mentioned it here that your relationship with your wife was it being a positive and collaborative relationship is one of the things that made the book possible. And again, I encourage everyone listening to this to read the book. I agree with the New York Times, the Washington Post, the New Yorker. You got to read this book. And one of the things that jumped out at me and made me laugh a little bit was when you're out on the walk with your wife on a gravel road, and I think you tell her, hey, I'm going to apply to be a letter carrier. And you refer to this as a strategy session. And then I started to have this judgment came up in my mind, honestly. And I thought, is Steve the kind of guy who has strategy sessions with his wife? And then I wondered, I sound like an asshole now. And then I wondered, I was like, is this the kind of family where they're having like quarterly check-ins with the kids? Like,
so it's a great question. And so let me start by saying there is no formal strategy formation process in the Grant household. I worked with a really super guy who has gone on to be a CEO at a couple of different places. And he's like, hey, can I show you a deck I'm working on? And I was like, sure. And so he starts to take me through this deck. I was like, hey man, I'm not going to name names. Hey man, so this isn't for work. Who is this deck for? He goes like, oh, this is for my wife and I. This is my quarterly review. And I was just like, what the fuck, man? You know, I had the moment you had, which I was just like, and so I was like, so how does this go down? Like, you guys sit down and then you go through this together, and he's like, yeah, and, you know, we look at the cash flow, and 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 kind of a long-term planning. And I was like, okay. So that's one end of the spectrum, right? And then there's just like pure improvisational chaos on the other end of the spectrum. And I think most people fall somewhere in between. I am a strategist by occupation. And I do tend to think of things long term. I uh, in the division of labor in our house, I've said that I'm a chief revenue officer and chief strategy officer. Alicia's chief financial officer and chief operations officer. And we do informally talk through like, okay, what's our game plan for the next 12 months here? I'm happy to say none of this ever goes into a PowerPoint. But I think anybody in a long-term relationship needs to have some kind of strategy formation process. It doesn't have to be formalized, but I think if you're not, and I have friends of mine that are just like, oh no, we never talk about that stuff, and I always think, how does anything get done?
Could you see you and Alicia having a Chip and Joanna style empire built around couples strategy? Is that
I
part of your
pray
longer
that
term
I
strategy?
pray that never comes to pass, Andrew. I think what you've described is a sort of a living hell to me. Um, I there is an avoidant component to my personality, and it's just like I don't like having some of these conversations with Alicia when we have to talk about hard shit, and so I try to be planful about it. It's like, all right, Steve, put your talking points together, think through what you're actually proposing here. Give her the bottom line up front, and then go through it from there. Which is a pretty different style than Alicia. Alicia's a little more discursive and likes to ask a lot of questions, which I occasionally I'm like why are we what's with the fifth degree that I'm getting here? Like why are we interrogating this so hard? But that's how I do think it's a successful process, how it works. I know when I ask her, okay, but just give me the bottom line up front, and then we can talk through it. Like, she doesn't like that. So I'm not going to say that that's always a smooth sailing process, because it's not. But I will say that conversation in the book is pretty much verbatim, and her reaction of like, don't pitch me, right? I think was I deserved that, because I will pitch. I don't even know when I'm doing it, but I'm just like, let me put this in the best possible light, and you know, and I think a more unvarnished approach would serve us better. Sometimes it's good to question my motives. Sometimes I think that's fair.
When you look back at the period of time when you were in the cabin near Lake Arrowhead, how long were you locked up? How long were you in that mode for?
Shit, let's see. That first go, I guess that was basically, that was about 3 months, 3.5 months. And then I did another tour in Northern California for, I'm going to say about 4 months, heads down. Up there in Guerneville, which is near, it's south of Humboldt, north of Santa Rosa in Sonoma County. Very beautiful area. I, that's a place that is really only occupied in the summer, and I was there like January through April, and it was like I was like living on the set of the X-Files for 4 months. It was nothing but fog and rain and redwoods, and like I got to know the owls that lived nearby. I was just like, oh, the owls are back, great. Oh, the ravens are back, oh, good, because it was just another living creature that I could interface with. Oh, there's the bear, all right. It I don't know if I've been that isolated from human contact ever, actually, in my life. There are many days I loved it, and there are a lot of days where I was just like, I really wish I could leave now. But I, for me, with my ADHD, it was actually very productive, and that I was just like, I physically stranded myself, to be able to do that stuff. I had to watch out for things like, it's just like, I'm going to do some repairs around the house, and I'll work on the water pump, or I'm going to rewire the socket. It's like, okay, you're finding stuff to distract yourself. I re-seasoned a couple of cast iron skillets, um, and got really into like re-seasoning these cast iron skillets. I was like, Grant, you are going down the rabbit hole on this, because you are losing your marbles up here. And and but it was a long time to be by yourself. I mean, that's what drafting is, though.
Going through this process inform or expand your sense of what you were capable of doing or what's possible? Because before you did this, as you noted, you'd done another of other large scale, long term, complex projects like making a film. These are things that take years to do.
Yeah.
Even with writing a book, I don't think most people think about it this way. You have this constellation of experts whose professional guidance and sense of what's good is critical in the process. So yes, you are the person at the coalface swinging the pickaxe, and you are also part of a team, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did this change who you thought you were and what you could do?
I'm glad, you know, chance favors the prepared, like we said earlier. And in some ways, I'm glad I was in my 50s when I did this, right? I don't know how steady I might have been as part of that team, but instead of having been a lead, a function lead in big teams on time pressure work, complex work, doing agency stuff, doing projects at Prudential when I was running the behavioral science lab there, and having to work with people have different job functions, and it has a long arc of time over it, but there's time pressure. If I think about kids out of the workshop where it's like they went to a good school, they've read a lot of books, they've spent a lot of time writing and becoming good at their craft, and that's the table stakes, right? That's cost of entry. And then there's this whole other battery of support skills that come along with that, of being able to do just what you said, orchestrate the work, be part of a team, work to a deadline, take on feedback, provide outputs that other team members need to talk to the press, or to get quotes behind your book, and all the rest of that stuff. And none of that comes naturally to me. None of that comes naturally to me. But I was able to arbitrage in sort of my professional, the skills I'd learned as a guy doing knowledge work in large organizations, and use that to support the kind of fledgling writer in me. And it was really important. I think for me, I very deliberately said, I'm not going to have an ego about this process, right? I'm going to divest myself of that. If my sense of self starts to get dinged by people asking stuff of me or giving me feedback, and I go to my kind of natural Appalachian, like, reach for the rifle, like, get off my land kind of stuff, that's not going to serve me well here. And so I have to have a kind of an emotional discipline about that, and be egoless. And I was pretty intentional about that. And I will say, I wasn't sure if I could do it, but it served me well in this process. And I am a lot more confident about my ability to do this work. I could do another book and I would set out. I think I would waste less time, and I would have a lot more confidence in going into it. I didn't know that I could do it. I had a sense. I had a sense in me that's like, hey, maybe you've been training your whole life for this, man. Like maybe this is the thing that like, and you're just going to drop back into the pocket and read the play, and we're just going to go to the end. We're just going to march down to the end zone, play after play. And I did think about it as like, I used to have a photocopy of Tom Brady's scouting report up on my wall because it was not good. They talked about like he had bad physique and good height, but bad physique, ability to read the field, and for him to go on to become, the greatest quarterback of all time, I thought that's a guy that had to have confidence in his ability to perform just one play at a time. But to do that, you can't have ego in order to be able to do it. Or I sense that my ego would become and there were times at which it flared on me, and I got, I felt like I was getting intruded upon, and that was good. Early covers of the book that came back I did not like them, and I was just like, am I part of a scrapbooking club? Like I was like, I had this really like nasty reaction to it, and I kind of torched my Megan on some of my feedback. I was too hot about it, and I was like, okay, Steve, dial it back. She's doing her job. She is trying to help you, man, and like don't be precious. I've worked in enough ad agencies where creatives get precious, and you just want to chuck them out the window. It's like, come on, man, you're not painting the Mona Lisa here. This is a for-profit enterprise where we're serving a corporate client. Let's not fool ourselves as to what we're doing here. And I tried to apply that thinking to myself. At least not the art part, but the rest of it,
Well, Steve, thanks for being here today. Thanks for this conversation, and I'm looking forward to whatever the next work is. Whether that's maybe we'll see that Timothy McVeigh.
maybe it'll finally see the light of day. That's right. And here, Andrew, I was all ready to talk about riding on gravel and give my city bike commuting tips. But we didn't talk about cycles at all. But I'm not the cyclist of the caliber that the folks that you have on here. And so, but I had an incredible time, and I cannot thank you enough for having me on your podcast.